last, Heineken 0.0, the new beer with great taste and zero alcohol, is here. So cheers to working lunches, CrossFit crunches, party nights you choose to drive, the weeknight meetups to watch the big match live. To all of these things we say, Heineken 0.0. Now you can.
Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast, the college basketball edition. We're doing the Wednesday college basketball card with our CBB expert, Robbie Vino. Rob, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am good tonight. Drew, how are you?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you coming on a little later on a Tuesday. This is the Wednesday card, so we would normally be doing this Wednesday about noon, but I'll be in the air going down to Costa Rica. So Robbie's jumping on Tuesday night, and we're doing a little bit of look-aheads, get this out as soon as possible. But we'll also have some shelf life with this podcast, Robbie. Good all the way up until 11 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, because we're doing a late-night game here, USC-Washington. The Degenerate special, the Get Back special, whatever you want to call it. But we got 5 games on the slate. And Robbie, your power numbers, you've been putting them out. We'll have them up on Sports Memo news section. You get those most days. How have those been going for you? Have they been helping you kind of prepare for the college basketball betting card?
Yeah, they always do, Drew. They always do. It's a steadying tool to have. Like I was saying a little bit last week, it sort of keeps you grounded to start the handicap so that you don't get carried away with what you saw last. Power ratings, generally speaking, just raw numbers, are an overview of a team's entire season. And it does help you from, you can really get off track quick by seeing a result. Let's just say we're talking on Tuesday. If we saw a game on Saturday and you see something and then you look at the line on a Tuesday and you think, wow, how could that possibly be? The power ratings are what keep you grounded. They show you where the numbers should be, discarding any injury or situationals. They don't factor that in. They're just raw numbers of talent and results according to, positive or negative towards the point spread all season long. So that's the way they're updated. They're updated on exceeding point spread expectations or not exceeding point spread expectations each and every game. And like I say, they're just a grounding force, a good way to start a handicap. I've always said 99% of the time it's not a reason to run to the window and go ahead and make a play just because you see a power rating number is different than the odds maker's opener is. But it certainly is a reason to go ahead and dig deeper into a game and figure out why you have the discrepancy that you do.
All right, Robbie. And guys, Robbie's been hitting 56% in college basketball, 57% in the NBA. That's for the full season, no cherry-picking dates or anything. That's on every play he's released in both college and NBA, so really knows his stuff. And a good follow on Twitter as well, at Rob Vino Sports. Robbie, let's start off in the SEC top of the card here, 781-782. Ole Miss at Florida. Looks like 132.5 the total. Gators laying 5.5 in the O-Dome.
Yeah, and both teams come off of the weekend's SEC Big 12 Challenge, a step out of conference into non-conference, and now hop right back into conference. So that has to be considered somewhat here, Drew. For Florida, it was their game against TCU. Very, very low-scoring game, hard-fought game. Florida tried to make a little bit of a run in the second half, didn't quite get there. TCU gets that win. For Ole Miss, they were involved with Iowa State on Saturday, and for those who watched, you saw a pretty good shooting display out of Iowa State, who really took Mississippi to task on the defensive end. Kermit Davis extremely unhappy with the performance of his team in that game, but they just couldn't stop that Iowa State guard-oriented offense. And like we said before, Iowa State, one of those teams in the Big 12 that could be a outside sleeper, when you get beyond the Dukes and the Kentuckys and the major forces in college basketball. Iowa State right now healthy looks to be a pretty good team. So I don't know if there's a lot of shame in that loss by Ole Miss, team that they hadn't seen before and probably weren't really very familiar with whatsoever until they get on the floor and realized how good they were. But here, maybe you get a bit of a bounce back. I'm not sure. The good news about doing this pod right now, Drew, is that even though it's not Wednesday afternoon, the day of the games, which we would generally do, is that we have the opening numbers in front of us and whatever movement has taken place within the last 45 to 60 minutes here. Florida opened this game 5.5, 131. quick push on the total here up to 132.5, which I think I could be in agreement with. Mississippi, like I just said, is having some problems on the defensive end the past couple of games. And, their overall numbers look pretty good, Drew, but since conference play has started, I've seen some spots where they've had difficulty. Florida's not the toughest team in the world to defend, but they do have strong guards, which Iowa State brought to the party on Saturday and made it pretty easy on the offensive end for themselves. So maybe Florida can do the same here. Florida off a loss, Mississippi off a loss, so you expect full effort out of both of these teams. But I might be more intrigued, like I said earlier, by this total at 132.5. If you look at Florida throughout the season, their home floor means a lot where their offense is concerned. A team that only averages 69 points per game overall, but a team that at home averages near 76. That's a +7 increase, and they're 6-3 over the total at home this season. So more comfortable at the O-Dome are the Florida Gators. Total does seem a little low for an Ole Miss game. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up even a little more here. For now, the very, very, very early handicap to me would be start looking at perhaps the over in that game.
All right, Robbie. We've got 801, 802 on the card in the Big 12. West Virginia at Iowa State. 149 the total here. Cyclones laying 13 in Ames.
And so it was a pretty good lead into this game, right, Drew? We talked a little bit about Iowa State just now in the previous analysis. And, boy, they had a near miss against Kansas. Almost got the 2-game sweep against Kansas when they lost last Monday, 80-76, but bounced back with a real good effort against Ole Miss, put up 87 points. And I think you're just starting to see the capability of this Iowa State offense, which – like we said earlier, it was banged up to start the year, but Lindell Wigginton, who many thought would have been the Big 12 Freshman of the Year last year, if not for the performance of Trae Young out of Oklahoma, Wigginton certainly was that good. He was hurt to start the season and really didn't round into form until the last couple of games. Also saw a big game out of Cameron Lard, who was hurt much of the season. So all these pieces are becoming cohesive for Iowa State. And even though they're smallish and they don't really have a solid rim protection plan on the defensive side, these guards can score and outscore most opponents. For West Virginia, a team that has lived off Bob Huggins' press for the last few years and now doesn't quite have the tools to press. This could be a difficult matchup for them. Iowa State, even if West Virginia was at their peak with Javon Carter last year, Iowa State probably has enough ball handlers and enough scorers on the floor at the same time in most instances over the course of 40 minutes to go ahead and break a press and score. It's not a team that's shy when they break a press. They'll go right for the score. So it's a team that I've been pretty fond of all season long, Iowa State, and they've had some successful point spread outcomes for me. It's hard to make the case at this point in time for the West Virginia side, except that the point spreads just keep getting bigger. And West Virginia, it's not for lack of effort out of that team, Drew. I think you and I talked about them previous to their SEC game on Saturday, and they were getting a lot of points there as well, and thought that maybe they could come close to Tennessee, but Tennessee just had way too much for them, especially in the way of size, and Tennessee did have a big bounce back game. So at this price tag, I'm not sure that Iowa State, even at home in Ames, is worth the play right now. But I will say this, in their home games, just average scores of their home games, they're winning by 22 points a contest, and West Virginia is losing by 14 points per game on the road. So you put those two numbers together, and it doesn't seem like it's real hard to lay 13.5 here. And it may not be. I'm just not totally sold yet on a team that I really like, Iowa State, laying this type of number. But if they come with the offensive effort that they had Saturday, then Iowa State's going to be very, very tough to beat in that game.
Robbie, we got another one here, 8-13, 8-14. This one's in the ACC. Before we get to it, want to throw out the coupon code for the podcast. It's 10 off. We're going to keep it running from before. 10OFF at checkout. We'll take $10 off of any play on the board at sportsmemo.com. Active right now. 10 off for $10 off any play. We got 8-13, 8-14, Syracuse at Boston College. The Orange laying 3 or 3.5 on the road. 139 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, and boy, BC, Drew, for what it's worth, in their game against Wake Forest on Saturday, they drew an awful lot of money toward over the total in that game, and that game got nowhere close to going over the total. I believe, off the top of my head, I think that thing closed at like 149 and a half. Game landed 126, 65-61 win for Boston College. Prior to that point, they had come off a couple of pretty high-scoring games against Louisville and Florida State. Can they get Syracuse to go with them here? Obviously, BC would prefer some pace. Syracuse would prefer to keep it slower under Jim Boeheim, as they always do. And more than that, the question would be, can Boston College shoot over top of the Syracuse zone, which they're likely to see? BC's been a fairly decent team shooting the three, especially in ACC play. They're ranked 6th out of the 14 teams as far as three-point percentage is concerned. So they've got some capability. However, for Boston College, Drew, when you watch them, it's almost as if you go out and defend Kai Bowman and try and take him out, and Boston College doesn't have a lot of other weaponry around him. If he has a huge game, they run hot. If he's and not hot on that particular day, then, or if the other team defends him well, then BC gets held, to what they got held to the other day, 65-61. So I like Syracuse. We talked about them as long as 3 weeks ago, before it became fashionable to talk about Syracuse. And they've really performed pretty well against the spread over the course of their last 7-8 games. I think this is another one where they come out on top here. I just feel like their defense is a little too much for BC, and they have more offense than maybe Jim Boeheim lets them exhibit. I think if this were a team that was allowed to run free a little bit more, not necessarily 40 minutes of up and down, but if they had the opportunity, I think they would show it. They ran into an absolute buzzsaw in Virginia Tech the other night, lose by 22. But to contrast Virginia Tech's three-point ability, which is they have some one of the best three-point percentages in the nation, and they're certainly the best three-point shooting team inside the ACC. You contrast that to Boston College. There's a bit of a difference there. I think Syracuse overall able to handle BC defensively. Will they handle the venue? I'm pretty sure they will. Right now, I'm just looking to check here at what we're staring at. We're staring at Syracuse as a 3-point favorite with an opening total of 137.5. The game gets pushed up to 138.5. Heritage, a lone straggler here at 139, so they're even higher. But Syracuse -3, to me, seems to be a pretty good place to start this handicap. I think that they'll bounce back off of the huge loss, perform pretty well. Power ratings had this game in general in pretty much the same area, Drew. I made Syracuse a 2.5-point favorite, so it seems to be in a good spot at 2.5. When you take into or at 3, when you take into consideration all the other things that I just brought to light here, I think Syracuse becomes a little better than 3 points over Boston College.
Good stuff, Robbie. We got 825, 826 up next in the SEC. LSU at Texas A&M. LSU -6, 152 the total. This is a 9 p.m. Eastern tip here, Robbie. These two teams know each other. But it's interesting. The Tigers laying 6 on the road. Are you interested in laying that number with LSU?
I'll tell you what, as I went through my power ratings, Drew, this line to me is one of the two for tomorrow's play that is off by the most. Power ratings showed me LSU only 1.5 on the road over A&M, and here they are laying 6. When you consider the fact that they come off that, I'd have to call it a miracle win at Missouri on Saturday. I mean, Mizzou, shorthanded as they were, as limited as they are on the offensive end of the floor, as difficult a time as they have with turnovers on the offensive side against a team that forces turnovers, Mizzou led that game by 12 with just a shade over 2 minutes left, I think. And, of course, we saw this a lot last year out of Missouri when their team was far superior to what it is this year. But late leads tended to dwindle away from Mizzou because they could not find a way to inbounds the basketball. And once again, these, I don't like to call out coaches, so I won't here, but it just baffles me sometimes that your team cannot get the ball inbounds when you have a lead, so you can get it to a free throw shooter who's going to get fouled and, go ahead and extend your lead or at least keep pace. Mizzou had trouble again, couldn't hang on at the end. LSU comes from way back, ties that thing, sends it into overtime, and not only sends it into overtime, but walks out with a point spread cover. Anybody who had LSU -5, 5.5 in that game, and they win by 6, is certainly you feel a little blessed getting that one to fall in your favor. Here against A&M, I don't know that that's going to happen for LSU. I love the team, love what they've done all season long. We've talked a lot about the improvement of LSU and Mississippi, and of course LSU led by Tremont Waters, one of the best point guards, not only in the SEC but in the country. But A&M has showed some improvement to me over the course of conference season, and I just, I think that the power rating number here, Drew, is far closer to the reality than what the odds maker has opened up with here. I think as we go along here, we're only an hour in to these openers, and I think as we go along throughout the night and into tomorrow, I think we're going to see some A&M money here because guys who just bet based on numbers are going to see that there's value in this Texas A&M side. I, for one, believe there's value in that side. They can score the basketball, which Mizzou can't, and I would think that even though the game's being played on Wednesday, so you got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday off, I still think that overtime win on the road by LSU takes a little bit out of them here into Wednesday's game against A&M. If they get behind, I don't know that they'll be as lucky as they were to overcome the deficit and beat A&M. So for me right now, I think I would look toward the +6 with Texas A&M. Total open 52. It's a firm 52 almost everywhere right now. In fact, everywhere I look, I see 152 for the total in that game.
Yeah, Robbie, I mean, looking at this, I agree with you. I think the number's a little steep. It's just tough with A&M because they're so up and down.
Right.
They've lost to a lot of – I guess they have played a tough SEC schedule, They have played Florida, Auburn, Kentucky, 3 of the top half of the SEC, so to speak, and then coming and losing to all of them. But coming back and beating Kansas State at home, I mean, that's promising. How much do you put into this bounce-back performance against the Wildcats?
I do. I put a little bit into it, Drew, because I think over the course of the last – let's just narrow it to 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. I think we've seen improvement by Billy Kennedy's team. And for me, having home court here and having a team that's off of the – tight contest that LSU is off of, I think that all adds up for them. You're right about A&M being up and down. They should have been, to this point, better straight up record-wise than they are. I mean, preseason predictions or prognostications heading in would show you that most people thought A&M was a better team than what their straight up record shows right now. But again, SEC, like you said, extremely tough. There's a couple losses in there that are inexcusable. I think losing to Arkansas at home is inexcusable for A&M. But to go on the road and beat Alabama, granted, on a buzzer-beating 3, still they were an underdog in that game and won. To have to play the schedule that they played, the one mirage that we have to throw out is the 43-point game that they had against Mizzou. But beating Kansas State was unforeseen by just about anybody. Kansas State is on such a roll with Dean Wade back. So to play that kind of defense and to get to 65 against K-State, I think is encouraging. And if you just look one game before that, Drew, remember in the first half against Florida, Texas A&M was dominating Florida in Florida. And the second half bounce back by the Gators got themselves that win. But I think we see improvement out of A&M right now.
Robbie, we got one game left, and guys, the coupon code for this podcast is 10 off, and it will take $10 off of any play available at sportsmemo.com. That's 10OFF at checkout for $10 off. 10 off is the coupon code. We got 8:39, 8:40, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific tip-off here in the Pac-12, Robbie. USC, the Trojans, at the Washington Huskies, 142.5 the total. Huskies laying 7.5 or 8 at home.
Yeah, boy, this is becoming a battle, or will be a battle for, in my estimation, Pac-12 supremacy at this point, Drew, because USC under Andy Enfield has bounced back really strong here. You know, they had a bad 4-game spurt through the month of December, where they played some tough competition, lose to Nevada, lose to TCU, lose to Oklahoma, lose to Santa Clara, which is unforgivable, double overtime loss. But their last 3 games in conference play, now maybe we can attribute it to UCLA being down this year, Arizona being down, and without a big man anymore, and Chase Jeter, who has really, you can see the difference in Arizona the last 2 games with and without Chase Jeter. That's probably why Arizona's sinking at this point in time. And then they beat Arizona State. Bobby Hurley's club, for what it's worth, where Pac-12 play is concerned, has been nothing but steady so far this season. I mean, they're not great, but again, by Pac-12 terms, they've been pretty steady. Now you get Washington, Mike Hopkins, and the Washington Huskies against USC. I think it's the 2 best talent rosters in that league. And the one thing we have to probably consider here before you go ahead and try and take points with USC is the venue. I think that the away portion of this game is the part that gives me the most pause in going out and grabbing USC plus points, because their only 2 conference road games, Drew, were both losses. They go to Oregon State and Oregon, which are, you know, Oregon suffered a multitude of injuries throughout this season. We know that. But Oregon State and Oregon are still 2 of the upper half of the Pac-12. And USC lost both of those games. Otherwise, they've played home inside the conference in their other 5 games. 5 out of 7 games at home so far. All wins. 2 road games, 2 losses. So that may be something to seriously consider when handicapping this game. Washington, obviously, I think is peaking right now and perhaps the best team inside the league. I know that Syracuse 2-3 zone, which Mike Hopkins brought with him from Syracuse to Washington, can be extremely effective against most teams. We'll see if UCLA is able, or excuse me, if USC is able to shoot their way through it. They've been a pretty good 3-point shooting team in conference play so far, hitting around 36%. And you've got the 2 best defensive teams in Pac-12 play going head-to-head right here. When we look at it, maybe the best way to go about this game would be to look at the under, which has really the over has taken a big hit right off the bat from 140, the opening number, up to 142.5. So a lot of over money early here. But to see both of these teams getting above the 71 mark might be a little difficult. Like I say, I go into this, you know, we're talking just as numbers come out here. I go into this thinking USC plus the points could be the way to go. But what worries me the most is the fact that they haven't performed away from home inside conference, and they just haven't been away from home through 7 games so far in conference, with 5 coming at home. So we'll see. We'll continue to look at that game, but it's certainly from a fan's perspective, and you know, you'll probably get Bill Walton on that game, so it's always entertaining to get Bill Walton. But that is one of the most important games of the night, and we'll see if Mike Hopkins' team comes out and wins that game by double digits, which is just about what's required here to cover the point spread. Then you know, the rest of these teams might have to kiss the Pac-12 goodbye, because Washington's going to run away with this thing, and perhaps they could put themselves in line for an at-large bid in case they don't win the Pac-12 tournament, because I know the opinion of many right now, and rightfully so, is that the Pac-12 is only going to get the tournament winner into the NCAA tournament this year. They don't have anybody worthy of at-large. It's a big game for both of these teams where that's concerned.
And, Robbie, 2 questions for you. One you touched on, I'll ask that second. But Bill Walton, you said, do you enjoy listening to him or no?
The last couple of times it's becoming a little bit annoying, to tell you the truth. I used to think, and up until very recently, I thought it was kind of comical to listen to him because I just think he's a pretty funny guy anyway. But the constant, and I don't know if it's predetermined now, the back and forth that goes on between him and I think it's Jason Benetti is the play-by-play guy. If I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong, but I think that's who it is. But I don't know if that's predetermined, that he just rips everything that the other guy says and makes him look like a fool. But it did become annoying the last couple of times I've seen those two together.
Yeah, I like him for about 10 minutes, but a full game, now I gotta turn it down. And also, you're talking about Pac-12 champion being the only team to go in. So, if we set the line at 2 Pac-12 teams in the tournament, you would take the under?
Yeah, right now that's, when you go, I guess the new thing is not the RPI, but these net ratings, Drew, which I'm not even positive about what the formula is with these net ratings. But if you just take it from the numbers perspective, it looks like, and the numbers will tell you that only one Pac-12 team is going to get in. There's human element, obviously, inside that committee room. And somebody on that committee is going to be a Pac-12 guy. I don't know which one it is, and maybe you get somebody to push one in. But the bottom line being, somebody's got to go ahead and compile a bunch of wins here, and it's hard to get impressive wins in a conference that's really void of impressive teams at this point in time. So beating Arizona right now doesn't mean what it used to mean. Beating Arizona State doesn't mean what it would have meant in December. Beating UCLA means nothing. The best team you can beat almost right now, beating Oregon doesn't mean that much because of injuries. The best team that you could beat in that league right now, aside from these two that are playing tomorrow night, is probably Oregon State. And how much is the committee going to put into that? So these two teams really have to try and run the table, and I think this win for either of these is very, very important. Probably better for Washington. Washington might have the better at-large case than USC does.
All right, Robbie Vino, follow him on Twitter at RobVinoSports. 56% in college basketball, 57% in the NBA. Solid handicapper, great choice. And the coupon code 10OFF takes $10 off of his or any Sportsmemo handicappers play for today, for tomorrow, for the Super Bowl. Any play up on the board, you can take $10 off using the coupon code 10OFF. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We will be back Thursday with some NBA and college basketball betting talk. Also, Friday's podcast, we got the Saturday look-aheads with Rob Vino and Brent Crow. So good stuff coming up on the Sports Memo podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and best of luck with your bets.
Mary!
What?
Where's me tops?
Wherever you left them.
Did you see me flip-flops?
Here. Make your next holiday fuss-free with an Avantcard personal loan. With personalised pricing that's made for you, at least there's one less thing to worry about. Find out more at avantcard.ie.
That me snorkel? Have you seen me snorkel?
Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Avantcard DAC trading as Avantcard is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
At last, Heineken 0.0, the new beer with great taste and zero alcohol, is here. So cheers to working lunches, CrossFit crunches, party nights you choose to drive, the weeknight meetups to watch the big match live. To all of these things we say, Heineken 0.0, now you can.